everyone, welcome to Adobe Live. I'm Jack, UI UX designer, illustrator, animator, and of course donut connoisseur. And today we have a really fun and a little bit different pro tips. We'll be looking at Adobe Capture. I think of Adobe Capture as kind of a mood boarding app. You can quickly document sketches to use in case studies, photos from client meetings like interior product shots to use for color palettes and branding later, or just reuse sketchbook content as patterns and brushes. Your content then gets added to Creative Cloud libraries from Capture, which makes it really easy to use your content in Illustrator, Photoshop, Express, etc., anywhere that you can use libraries. So as always, please let me know if you have any questions as we're going through things today in the chat. We've got a live chat here on Behance and on YouTube. Hello to Sean and Mark, Frojan, Gareth, and Annika, our mod. If I switch to the overhead cam, so this is what we're going to be working with today. I've got a whole sheet of sketches and doodles I've done in advance to save some time. I'm putting together a Pride-focused library that I'll be sharing with you all as well. I threw the link in the chat, and I believe it's in the description if you want to check that out. There's all kinds of goodies. You can feel free to use these as you'd like to put together social posts, for example. They're free for you to use, or you can just follow along with my tips and sketch out your own. So we got a few variations here. On the left side of this sheet, I've got a whole bunch of fun little illustrations, and on the right side, I've got some illustrations, but I've also got, these are like some ideas I can use to make some brushes. These over here, obviously, I've got some, like I said, some Pride focus. I've got the Pride flag, I've got the classic, we've got, you know, modern approach. I've got a donut, of course, because I wanted to make this kind of personal as well to me. We've got our little donut, and we've got, of course, our like fun little rainbow pen tool over here. So to get started, I'm going to show you how to make brushes from these. So I'm going to grab my iPad, and you can use Capture on your iPad, on any, like your phone, or actually in Photoshop as well. I like to use it, like I said, on my phone or on my iPad because it's kind of like an on-the-go sort of a thing. So I'm showing you here, this is what I'm going to be working with, but we're actually going to switch over to my desktop so you can see this is literally what you're seeing is what's on my screen. So this is what the Capture app's going to look like when you open it up. You're going to see all of your kind of libraries. You can click into these libraries if you wanted to work directly in them and add right from them. So if you go into the Illustrator Challenges one or whatever, you can see if we click on this camera down here, you're going to be able to start working right in that library. You can also tap on Create, and here you can see all of the different options that you have to create with inside of the app. But if the way that I kind of, whoop, looks like we lost our connection here. Hold tight. I'm going to connect back to my screen. Just going to give it a minute. But you can switch to the camera here. And this is what I'm going to be working with. When I load it up, I've got the camera here, selected color mode, but if you scroll up and down on these options along the side, the right side here, you can see all the different things we can capture. We got audio, materials, type, shapes, colors, looks, patterns, and then at the bottom it's going to be brushes, which is where we're going to start. So in the brushes camera option, you can see, I can see like my whole desktop, right? But you're going to see that I can kind of zoom in on my sheet of brushes here. And on the right, I've got this little slider, and as I drag it up, it's actually going to remove the background. So I'm going to get this sort of transparency grid in the background that lets me know that I've gotten rid of it. And as I drag down towards the bottom, it's going to bring more of that sheet back. So I'm going to drag it up just until I've kind of gotten rid of most of the background there. I just kind of want to zoom on one of these brushes, and then I'm just going to take a photo. And right when I do that, it's going to take me into this kind of brush editing mode. I'm not going to worry about what's on the left side for the time being. This is just kind of like what it starts you with, which is like the whole screen that it's captured, everything that's on it. I'm going to make some adjustments in here. So every single time you take a capture of something, you're going to get this kind of refining mode that's got these tabs along the top. And this kind of area in here that's going to give you a preview of what your brush is going to look like. And you can use your finger to just kind of doodle something out to see how it looks, or you can use the Apple Pen. I'm going to switch to crop. I actually like to work kind of all over the place in this little menu here. So I'm going to start over in crop. I'm not going to worry about what it looks like so far because we need to refine it. So you get inside of crop this little window. and it's got these options these blue lines that says tail, body, and head. That's actually like the front and the back of your brush, and then the middle is body. And so when you're working with this, it's kind of important to remember that your brush is going to be kind of right to left. So you need to line up your brush inside of this little window so that the head or the front of the brush, how you want it to draw, is going to start on the right and then it's going to move to the left. So if I just kind of zoom in on one of these, I can just kind of pinch and zoom. I want to fill this space with one of my brushes, right? And you can see that right now, if I kind of draw out, you can see that it's got that weird like edge to it, right? We need to drag these blue lines over to the far right to where the brush starts, and we need to drag over to the far left for tail where the brush ends. You can also adjust this box sort of larger and smaller to kind of crop in closer on your brush there. And that's really all there is to it, to getting started making a brush. Now we can see that we've got this really fun kind of streaky brush going on with these lines. And I can go into refine if I want to adjust the background contrast a bit more. So on the bottom right here, if I pull away, it's going to start to kind of dissolve or like increase the white values of my brush instead of the darks. Or I can go the opposite way and it's going to bring back some of those darks to make a heavier brush. So this is really kind of up to you what kind of style of brush that you want. And then going back over to style really quick, along the side you can see we've got a whole bunch of options for our Illustrator brush. By the way, I forgot to mention this, but you've got two kind of options at the bottom here. You can make pixel brushes or you can make vector brushes. You know that I love Illustrator, so we're doing Illustrator brushes today, but you could make pixel brushes as well. Pixel brushes are for Fresco or for Photoshop. Just be aware that it's kind of like a one-way ticket. Whichever route you go, once you start editing, you know, that brush and that mode or whatever, you're gonna stick with that all the way until the end. You obviously could capture that, I could capture that shape again and make a pixel brush, but for today we're just sticking with vector brushes because we're gonna hop into Illustrator after this, you know me. So we're gonna go back to, before I move off the screen, in here, along the side, you can see there are different kind of modes of, or different kind of like styles they're called, of brushes. So these two here kind of behave like a traditional art brush where as you draw, it kind of like pulls that shape. This bottom one here is more like a restrained version of that. I kind of think of it as like a scatter brush. I'm not sure if that's like the correct way to think of it, but or like an art brush where you aren't allowing it to stretch and pull, right? It's just keeping the single shape there. So if you wanted to use one of these brushes, these samples that I've given you that are more like shapes, and you just wanted to have like little shapes that you could place, more like a scatter brush, I would use this option. But we're gonna go with the art brush because I like this top option because I like the streakiness of it. Once you're ready, you're just gonna go up to save. And when you hit save, it's going to pull up a place where you can give your brush a name. I recommend doing this just so you can keep track of what your brushes, what they are after you make them. So I'm going to name this one Thin Streaky Lines. Something like that. Or Lines. Typing. Alright, and then I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to change my library to be my Pro Tips library. And then I'm just going to hit save. And it's just automatically going to push it to my libraries. So that's how you would go about making a brush. You can feel free to continue to kind of do that here. I'm going to move on, and I'm actually going to capture now some of my sketches. So I'm going to go back to camera. And going out of brush mode, I'm going to go into shapes. And once you go into shapes, you're going to get the same kind of a thing where you have this slider along the side. This time, this slider is going to control the contrast. So if I go up, it's going to become darker. If I go down, it's going to become lighter. So you can kind of control this to get your sketches kind of how you want them to come in with, you know, as much or as little contrast if you wanted to just really pull down. What I'd recommend for this is actually to get to a point where in the middle where most of that dark stuff is kind of gone. So you can see if I go up here, you start to get like shadows. Any of those shadows are actually going to save as a part of your image, and you don't want to do that. You want to try and cut out as much of that kind of like dark stuff as possible and just get the lines without removing the lines, of course. So it's kind of a balance. And once you're ready, we're just going to hit that camera button again to capture it. If you don't get it 100%, it's not a huge deal because we have this refining step. So I'm going to, again, hop all over the place. I'm going to start with a crop. So I want to just crop in on only the illustration. So I'm going to drag in here, cropping out the kind of extra negative space. And then I'm going to go back. Once I'm kind of happy with the crop here, I'm not going to worry about that stuff on the side. I'm going to show you how to get rid of it in a second. I'm going to go back to refine. And now from refine, I can use the eraser, which is down here, this little icon down here. And I can kind of zoom in and I can get rid of any of the, pinch and zoom, get rid of any of this stuff that I don't want to save with this. When you are working, I like to do this because anything that you leave in this view, whatever you see on the screen, is going to save as a part of your shape. So the more you can like clean it up and get rid of any of the stuff that you don't want now, the less heavy that file is going to be when you go to use it. So I really like to go in here, you know, and just kind of erase out. I was playing with this and I didn't really like the way that that kind of turned down on these hands. So I think I'm going to get rid of those lines, for example. You know, you could go in here and get rid of like the edge of this comes over top. So you can start to do some cleanup before you even get into the app. And that's just going to make it way easier, or when you get into any of the apps when you're using this item from your library. Now the last step that I like to do here, and this is entirely personal preference, is I like to go to smooth. And this kind of takes your artwork and again kind of cleans it up for you before you get into any of the programs and you want to use this library in. So when I turn this on, it's going to kind of do what is like a first pass at a simplify. So if you've ever used like object path simplify in Illustrator, it's going to do that kind of a thing where it's going to just kind of simplify and smooth out all of those lines so that they're just a little bit cleaner before we save it out. If you wanted more of a hand-drawn approach, you wanted to keep that kind of roughness, you could just go back and turn that off. Just keep in mind that it will make a heavier file because you're keeping more of those points to get those rough edges. So I'm going to leave that on, and we can save this. And if you've taken a look at our library that I've shared with you all, the Pride Resources link, you're going to know that I've already got this in here kind of saved as sketches. So we're not going to save this over again, but I would go in here and I would type in sketches, and then I would hit, you know, save, and it would save to that library. So that's how I would go about doing that. Now, once we get out of here, we can actually bring this shape and we can further refine it if we wanted to in Illustrator because this is a vector shape. So that's what we're going to do in a second. But there's one more thing that I want to do before we hop out of Capture and start using these assets, and I want to create a color palette. So if we go back out, I'm just going to discard these changes. I'm going to go out to colors, and you can see there's a whole bunch of options in here. You can make substance materials, you can capture audio, you can capture type if you wanted to identify the font that you're looking at. Etc., etc., etc. Patterns are really cool. You could play with this. I would recommend it, actually, to create some cool patterns out of some of these sketches. But we're going to look at colors, and as soon as I hit colors, it's actually going to start to pull colors from my desktop. So it's going to start making these little nodes that are bouncing all over the place. I'm going to use a photo. So like I mentioned before, this is a really great way to utilize photos if you've taken some, you know, if there's like a mood board that you're working with a client and there's some colors you want to capture from that, or you have, in my case, some photos from an event. So I've got some photos from Pride. We're just going to grab, this is a local Pride event. I'm just going to grab one of these. We'll do this one. And you can see that it's already putting these little nodes. So I'm just going to drag these around, and as I drag them around, I can kind of change the colors. So let's grab the blue one, since that one's at the top, right? And I can pick, like, maybe I want pink instead or something like that. And you can start to put together a really nice color palette this way. What I would recommend doing, what I like to do, is I like to play with these color adjustments over here. So on the left, if I tap on that, you're going to see that I've got a whole bunch of color adjustment options, things that you've kind of seen before in the past. Saturation, brightness, and contrast. And it will take the colors in your image and it will adjust them, but then it will translate to your color palette. So it's a really cool way to see how, you know, maybe obviously I want some like brighter colors for this. I love bright colors. I can't help it. It's who I am. But we're going to try and get some brighter colors for our illustrations, and but I want to pull them from, you know, obviously the event. Let's say we're making this for an event, like a social post for this event, and these are some photos from last year, so we're going to reuse them. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to just kind of adjust these. So as soon as I hit saturation, it's going to make this image a lot more saturated. I can control it just like you can with, you know, saturation sliders in any of the other apps. And if we go over here, we can also adjust the brightness. So if we wanted to have some brighter colors, we can kind of slide it. And you can see that I'm starting to get more brighter colors along the side here. And then we can go over to hue. And I find this to be really fun. So I can just kind of slide this around. And I can get like, you know, interesting color combinations. I don't know. I find this to be a really great way to kind of pull some colors. And the nice thing is you can kind of see them in context. So you can look at it and say, like, do these colors actually look nice together when they're applied to an image? In this case, our photo here. So that's what I would do, is I would just kind of go through and I would make these adjustments until I feel like that's kind of a cool color palette, right? And then we would go ahead and we'd hit this little check over here. And that's going to bring you to your kind of standard Adobe Color menu. So you've probably seen this before if you've used Adobe Color. You've got the same kind of options. We can edit the colors on an individual basis just by tapping on them if we wanted to adjust these a little bit. You know, make this maybe a little bit more, you know, a little brighter, go into the oranges or something like that. We can do so. You can also, you know, apply any of your color harmonies to this if we wanted to kind of drag them around that way. Once we're ready, we're going to hit save, and this is going to save a color theme to our library. So I'm just going to call this one, it's kind of like primary color rainbow. So I'm going to go with primary rainbow. Right? And I'm just going to hit save, and it's going to save that color theme to my library. Oh, it looks like we lost our screen, but that's okay. We're actually going to hop over to Illustrator now. So now that we're back in Illustrator, you can see I've got my little library pulled up, and this is kind of what you've got in that library. That you can see a little sneak peek of what we're going to be doing. So this is the library that I put together for you. You've got like the brushes that we made. I got a couple additional ones that I made, and I've got these sketches in here. So if you wanted to drag this straight into Illustrator, you can just drag and drop from that library, and it'll pull that in, and you can see that this is a vector asset. So we can scale it down. You can see all that stuff is in here. So if you wanted to, you know, you could ungroup. You can actually make little brushes out of these shapes as well inside of Illustrator if you wanted to, using the brush options in here. But what we're going to be doing, I'm actually going to delete this, is we're just going to be working with our sketches. So I'm going to drag my sketches in. I'm going to scale it down a little bit to fit our artboard, and then we're going to just do an ungroup. Now, I'm going to go through here, and I'm just going to group these really quickly. So we're going to make these individual assets. One thing that I like doing when I'm working with stuff like this, like I've got a lot of sketches on a board, is I like to use the lasso tool. And I feel like people don't use the lasso tool in Illustrator. So this is really handy when you need to just kind of make really careful selections around things. Instead of trying to mess around with the selection, the rectangular selection marquee, just use the lasso tool. It's going to make your life way easier to try and select those little things. And, for example, for our little flag here, I was a little overzealous on the angle of this, so I'm going to fix that by just going around with my lasso tool. And I'm just doing this with the mouse. You know, it doesn't need to be super precise. It just helps me get that section without selecting the whole thing. And I'm going to use the free transform tool. So I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to use the basic free transform, and we're just going to skew it a little bit. We're going to bring it back in place. Say like, whoa, you got a little crazy there, Jack. Let's fix it and get it kind of straightened out so it looks, you know, a little bit better in perspective. Same thing up here. You can see that the angle of this is a little bit wonky. I'm just going to select that whole group that I made, and I'm just going to kind of fix it. So I'm just doing a little bit of fixing here. You could also, if you hadn't done smoothing, or if you did and you still have a lot of points, you know, you can select everything. We can go to object, we can go to path, and simplify, and that's going to reduce the number of points even further. I would be a little bit careful because when you get down too low, you can see that we start to lose the integrity of some of these illustrations. It's just kind of something to be aware of. Be careful about dragging that down too much. And then at this point, if we liked these and we wanted to save these as individual assets, we wanted to keep the line art example, for example, we could go here and we can take our kind of classic pride flag, we can add it as a graphic, and we can group this. So, for example, here's one of the brush that we made. And I'm going to grab this and pull it up to the rest of my brushes. So now it's kind of added to that library. And then down here, I could go and make a new group. We can scroll up to the top, and we can rename that group. You can name all of this stuff. We can name this like line art sketches, right? Just kind of keeping everything organized. You can see I've got these rainbow brushes in here for you, the color versions, etc. And speaking of, I'm actually going to show you how to make the color versions right now. So I'm going to select my little donut here, and I just want to kind of add some quick color to these. So imagine you're working on a client project. You want to just get some sketches over to them that showcase what the color palette's going to look like, the ideas, just kind of like ideation, a great way to share ideation with a client. So we've got our donut selected, and I'm going to grab my color palette down here, just at the bottom, my color theme. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add my color theme to swatches. I'll add this one too. You just add all of them. And let's say we want to soften the look of this. I can add a fill color to the lines, and very quickly, so because I kind of made these closed paths, and this is important to note, I can use live paint on these. So I'm going to go to the live paint tool. I'm going to click, and anywhere that I kind of hover over that's a closed shape, you can see it highlights with the color, a place where I can add a fill color. And I can just go through here, selecting all of my swatches, and just kind of go through and paint this really quickly, adding those colors that we pulled from our event photo. It's a really fast way to get some assets into our library. We can kind of go here, we'll adjust this color down, just kind of make this a little bit of a lighter for our donut. And there you go. I would go through, that's how I did all of these. I just kind of went through and applied the colors really quickly to all of the assets using live paint. And then again, I just drag this and I just add it in as a graphic. And it adds it into my library just like that. Once you have your library all kind of complete, you can really take this and go anywhere. You could make a grid repeat in Illustrator. If you wanted to, you could copy and paste this shape, merge it, and use an offset path to make a sticker design. You could bring it, you could bring it into Photoshop and use a like a Adobe stock mockup to create like product mockups on t-shirts and stuff like that. What I did and I thought was really fun is I took these into Adobe Express and I put together this super quick social template. So we're kind of sticking along the Pride theme. Imagine that like the event that I attended, maybe they want to do another event and they, wanted me to keep it kind of on brand by pulling the colors from their event photos. We pull in the quick sketches I did, and I can put something together really quickly for them that kind of reflects the brand and the idea. How I did this is I literally went in and I grabbed one of the templates, and then I went into my stuff at the top. We can go to brands and libraries. We can navigate right down to our pro tips library here. You can see our sketch is already in here, and we can just drag and drop these assets right in here, and they just kind of get added in. You can scale them down, you can move them where you want. It would be really fun to do like a bake sale kind of a theme with the donut or something like that. And then you've got your colors too. So the background color, I just went down here and picked my yellow. And then the same thing with I just typed in some, kind of a mock copy for this event. I just typed in, some additional details. So that is everything. Feel free to use these assets, like I said, as you would like. They're free for you to use in that library that I shared. That's all the time we have for today on this stream. But thank you so much for joining me and taking a look at different ways that you could utilize Adobe Capture across all of the apps. But stay here though. We've got more amazing live streams here on Behance up next after me. All right, bye everyone.